A very good morning to everybody. And thank you for logging in today into this series called Resilient Lincolnshire that's being run by the Lincoln International Business School at the University of Lincoln. Now, we are very, very excited that this series has taken off really well, and we're getting a lot of support from all of you. Today, right now, we are live on Facebook, through LinkedIn, and our YouTube channels. So thank you so much for joining in and joining us today. Given the moment of time that we are in and our responsibility as a business school and a university to be able to get the discussion between the business, various aspects of industry and academics together on a platform, we take that responsibility very seriously. We run a lot of platforms, of course, and networks where we bring these conversations together. But when we found ourselves in this moment of history, where we began to see a lot of innovation and resilience that Lincolnshire businesses in particular have shown, we found it a great opportunity to launch an online platform, and that's what we call Resilient Lincolnshire. Now, we ran this in conjunction with the Center for Resilience at the Business School, and we're so delighted that we are able to run two streams of this platform. One, which is an executive education series that you would see on our Facebook page and on LinkedIn and through YouTube. And the second one, which is this that we are in, is called Business Beyond the Curve. Now, Business Beyond the Curve was conceptualized as a series of conversations from key decision makers in the industry, from people in Lincolnshire, from businesses in Lincolnshire, whose lives this moment of history has touched, which is all of us really. So over a number of episodes, and this today is episode 5, we're going to explore various aspects of economy, business, people's lives, and take various segments and cuts to take a look at what lies beyond this curve. Now, you could interpret the curve as the flattening of the curve that we all, anxiously look forward to every day, but also the curve of our own lives, whatever that may look like. So we're really, really excited today. And this is one panel that I've been so looking forward to, because it's something that impacts each of our lives, and that is sport. Now, sport, of course, is a part of our lives, whether we are a supporter, a player, a coach, and importantly, the business of sport as well. And all of them we find are hugely interlinked. So we thought that we could get a 360-degree view into sport today. And from what you tell me on Twitter and LinkedIn, and the way you're responding to my posts, it really seems like it's something which you're really looking forward to as well. So we've got a wonderful panel done together here. And in conversation with that panel today is my colleague, Martin Hickerton. So Martin, morning.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Ruchi.
Morning. So Martin, is at the business school with me. Martin is the director for MBA programs, and he's also our partnerships manager and lead. Importantly, Martin is a sports fan and a player of repute. Martin, shall I say?
I don't think repute's quite the word, but I have turned my arm over in the Lincoln League of cricket a few times back in the past, and I am an avid follower. I'm proud to say of Lincoln City, so local boy, and I do like the club and follow them regularly. So
that's excellent, Martin. Then who better than you to lead this panel today? And I'm really excited about the people that we've brought on the panel today, Martin. And I'll hand it over to you to introduce them. But what are you most looking forward to in this interaction today? There's so many aspects that we potentially can cover. What are you?
I think it's that breadth of discussion we're going to have. So just in preparation, we've been talking to people who've got such rich insight into this, and being in this lockdown period that we've all been through, that opportunity to connect with people, have an open discussion and learn, which is obviously what the university is all about, to continue that learning through these sorts of dialogues is fantastic. So I'm looking forward to hearing what everyone's got to bring to the conversation.
Excellent. Then without holding this up much longer, let me introduce the panel in and say hello. So Liam Scully probably needs no introduction. Morning. We've got with us Rory Underwood. Rory, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. So pleased to have with us a woman representation of the right order and spirit. Victoria, morning. Really pleased to have you here with us.
Morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Victoria. And a really important representation through Gary, and I think a lot of people would know Gary from what I hear and the reach of his voice, across from what he writes. So Gary. Welcome. So what I'll do is I'll leave the panel in Martin in your capable hands, and I'll come back at the end. So have a wonderful, wonderful discussion.
Thank you, Ruchi. And thanks for coming along, guys. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us this morning. and it's going to be really good to get to understand your thoughts on the subject of sport. So to introduce around, obviously Rory, ex-England rugby player, also RAF pilot, who we've collaborated with at the business school a few times before, now owner of his own business, Wingman. We've got Liam, who's chief executive of Lincoln City Football Club, so the man in the hot seat at Sincil Bank. Vicky, I won't call you Victoria, Vicky Brackenbury, who's played for Lincoln City herself, works in organisational development at South Kesteven District Council, and Gary Hutchinson, who many of you probably follow on Twitter, owns stacywest.net, blogs about sports, Division 1-2 football, and particularly Lincoln City, hence the background in his room there. I was going to kick off with a fairly straightforward question, and Rory, I'd like to turn to you if that's okay, but these are tumultuous times and coronavirus has impacted on everything in our lives. The whole of society's turned upside down. So within that massive change we find ourselves, how important is sport within that? And should we be worried about the business of sport at the moment?
So yeah, nice easy starting question, Martin. I mean, one of the things you find is that, like anything else, you don't realise you miss something until it's not there. And what we're all finding with sport, what I do on a weekend, I haven't got 3 games of rugby to watch or see what the football's happening. So it's interesting how it's affecting us all. I mean, individually, sporting to a lesser extent, we've been allowed to do some exercising. I go out and cycle in the Vale of Beaver, but individually, we've been able to do some activity as allowed to by the rules. Mm-hmm. But I think it's the team sort of thing that's is really being affected by people. So those people who do play team sports, and it doesn't have to be the active ball sports and things, golf, you know. So lots of pictures of people enjoying themselves on a golf course yesterday because they've been allowed to go out. But the impact of all that on not only businesses per se, so obviously looking at Liam there with the challenges of clubs and myself and my involvement with Leicester Tigers, there's also all the small clubs and social societies and all the different things that rely on people to come and do something, and also buy a few pints and drinks in the social side that make the whole setup go wrong. So in our field in rugby, it's not the challenge for us at the Premiership level, where it's all professional sport, the challenges of playing millions, relatively speaking, to the football Premiership. But also even the lower leagues and the challenge they have, where these clubs are basically founded on just players don't get paid for anything. They just turn up, they drink a few beers, and the clubhouse get used every now and then, and it just breaks even along the way. But it's a social centre that allows people to go to. And, you know, it's one of the questions get asked a lot about Vicky will probably allude to this, that for others, if it's played team sport, what is it you've missed most about team sport? A lot of us will say that sense of camaraderie and that social side of being part of something together. And it doesn't have to be about winning, it's just being part of that identity. And that's very much missing. And I miss that. I miss going down to Tigers on a Saturday and watching the boys play and being part of the crowd and everything. I miss watching sport. It's the middle of it's not middle of the summer, but you know, it's the cricket season, and there's no cricket going whatsoever. So you're obviously pining for the fjords. So there's a massive, massive challenge at the moment, and in all the discussions are going on, and I'm sure, especially Liam, at the level they're at, the challenge is no different for all of us, trying to work out how do we get through this current period, and how do we get through the other side, especially the challenge of social distancing.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's bring Liam in at this point. So Liam, obviously chief executive at the football club. It's going to have had a massive impact. We know that. Can you share a little bit of that with the audience today? Tell us about what it's been like. We'll start with the where are we now, and then we'll move into the future a little bit later on. So what's it been like for you at Lincoln City?
Yeah, I think the challenge obviously vast, and I think the biggest challenge we face right now is the fact that we've got a great deal of uncertainty right across the game and right across the decisions we're trying to make. I think anybody that is in business or in competitive sport, the one thing we can all deal with is a scenario that's thrown. Know what that looks like. That's sport. But what we've got at the moment is we've just got so many uncertainties. It's difficult, nigh on impossible to plan a way through this. And I think that the key element, you know, for a League One, League Two football club, possibly even at championship level, you know, we are wholly reliant on matchday income. You know, effectively, we trade for 30 days a year, which is our football and our league games. outside of we're effectively a dormant business. We're kicking on for the next game at the weekend. So to lose, a third of our opportunity from the financial landscape, that is obviously going to have a huge impact. The wider financial deals and sponsorship deals then sits challenge that you're finding across elite sport, both in football and other sports, is the fact that we effectively, because of the different leagues and the nuances that we've got, the common solution for the Premier League have to be, they have to look at the broadcasting element. For them, that is the element that they have to appease right now. Whereas in League One or League Two level, broadcasting deals aren't so high, but match day revenue is a huge driver. So, whilst the Premier play behind closed doors or without stadiums, at League One and League Two level, that's not necessarily a solution. The other thing that we've got to do as sports, we've got to protect the integrity of the game. What this all stands for, and the reason why people come into our stadiums, and the reason why people buy our tickets, because they're there to get behind something, and that's getting emotionally involved, financially invested in clubs. Now, if we then come up with a solution that actually then impacts the integrity of the sport, our whole purpose, our whole being is lost. So that's where we've got to be very careful as we look to plot our way through these scenarios. The fact that the reason why people buy into us, and the reason why fans follow avidly, get up at 5 a.m. in the morning to drive to Plymouth or Carlisle or whatever, is because of and I hate calling it, because of the product, because of the outcome that they were on that pitch for 90 minutes. Or that could be cricket or rugby or any other sport. And what we've got to do is we've of course got to survive this. We've got to do it in a manner that fans can still relate to their game, for their thing that they're buying to. And we've said this many times over. We are merely not our football. It belongs to the fans. Lincoln City's been here for over 135 years. We've got to make sure that it's here beyond them, but it's also in a form that represents what the fans can still get behind.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's that connection with fans remains really important, doesn't it? And making sure that as a business you are at the heart of the fans and it's their understanding. And Gary, if we move across to you, somebody who writes within the sports world, a fan blogger, as it were, what's been the impact on the fan base? What's it been like in this period when ordinarily you do into the end of the season?
I think it's been quite challenging. I think the main problem is the not knowing what's going to happen. I think football fans are fairly resilient in that, the football itself has probably survived much worse in terms of world wars, etc. But we get to this point now, and I think fans accept that there's a problem, but they always want to know what's going to happen in the future. I mean, the very essence of football is always that no matter how bad you are, there's always hope that tomorrow is going to be better. And as a Lincoln fan, I think I know that probably better than anybody. So I think it's that level of uncertainty that's affecting people more. There's actually been quite a nice period for reflection, if I'm to look at a positive, because again, when you're a successful football club, you're always looking at the next step. So when we won League Two last year, everybody's suddenly talking about moving into League One, whereas this has given everybody time just to settle down, look back at the last 2, 3, 4 years and realise what we've achieved and appreciate that. So there's a positive there. But then I think obviously on the other side, it's the camaraderie that Rory mentioned. It's the going to the games. It's the meeting up with your family, your friends. It's the having a drink. It's the being part of that collective, particularly at Lincoln City at the moment when the collective is so positive and it's so large, 8,000-9,000 people. And for some people, sport is very much their entire life. I mean, obviously I write about it, but I do have other things around me other than sport. But I know people who live for Saturday to Saturday. That's what they're all about. And for those people, it's been incredibly tough. And as a content creator, it's been quite hard to try and keep people engaged on a positive level. It's important not to be negative. It's important not to write always about the pandemic, about what might happen. Speculation helps nobody. So it has been challenging, but sports fans are very resilient. And whilst the club's still there, they'll remain committed to supporting it, whatever happens.
Thanks, Gary. It's a really interesting insight in how the fans are seeing this and sort of maybe looking forward to the future already. Vicky, I know we chatted through work before. You're a mad keen sports fan, and you're really interested in sports and you've played sports. From your perspective, what's this lockdown period been like for you as somebody who consumes a lot of sport?
It's certainly been it's hit hard times because, like you say, sports kind of becomes a bit of a ritual. Certainly, being a massive football fan primarily. Unfortunately, Liam, although I played for Lincoln briefly, I'm an Ipswich fan, so I'm a tractor girl. But we won't talk about the result this season at because it didn't go so well for us. But yeah, in terms of how it's hit, I think big sports fans, we're finding other ways to try to occupy ourselves and fill that void. So personally, I've turned a bit to NFL with the NFL draft, been playing virtual darts with friends. Obviously, we've probably all been involved in lots of sporting related quizzes. It's not quite the same as kind of going and sitting amongst fans and soaking up the atmosphere. But I think people have started to become quite creative and looking at innovative ways to try to fill the void, but obviously looking forward to when we can all kind of go back to those days and meeting friends, having a few drinks, soaking up the atmosphere, like Rory alluded to earlier. But it's definitely hard. But obviously, with the restrictions easing slightly in terms of being able to go out and play some of the individual sports like cycling and going out more than once a day and golf, that's having a good impact. And I think it's the mental and physical impact on people that does really hit home if you are somebody that's really involved in sport.
Thank you, Vicky. It's really, really good reflection there. And we're thinking about the impact of sports on work, because actually sports is part of the fabric of life and it does permeate through. Rory, I was going to throw this question to you really, but obviously as somebody who's had different careers, an RAF career and latterly a business owner, how do you think your sports experience has impacted on your work life throughout?
Crikey, that's a left field question. I don't know. How can I relate to that? I suppose the nearest I could relate to that would be something. Well, I suppose the nearest would be like when you go on tour, especially when you go abroad. You just end up living out of hotels. You train. You literally go back to the hotel. You try and relax and chill. You're in the same hotel and you just stay in hotels all the way through. So sounds like what they're trying to do with the football and the rugby and sport, trying to get back and getting have these closed environments, but. It's, to be honest with you, it's from the closeness of the actual situation. It's hard to compare the two in the context of how sport may potentially help you with regards to what you're doing. For us all that play the team sport, what the difficulty is that we rely on being, especially you're on tour. You make you've got your people, you're friends with, your teammates. You wander around, and you get that chance. But here now, you are closeted at home. And that's nothing against the family, obviously. And the ability to. Now, what's been fascinating is that in the last 2 months, as Vicky alluded to, the amount of things that people have been doing online, on either Zoom or Teams or whatever, and getting creative around it. The number of people have said to me, they get together once a week and have a beer and curry night. And they've also said, this is brilliant. We'll do it again. And they're all fantastic. I think my wife's having a book club every week or virtually every 2 weeks now. So there's a lot more of that going on. And interestingly, just to take from I run a charity golf day every September for Macmillan. And this year it's looking unlikely it's going to go ahead. I normally do it at Belton Park Golf Club. And so I've been actually feeling out, how can I possibly, because half the enjoyment of the golf day is being there. It's not just playing the golf. It's not just giving money. It's also the camaraderie and the sense of the enjoyment of the day. So I could run a virtual golf competition, but I just hand the money over. So I've been trying to work out, how can I run a virtual golf thing where you get 4 people that pay. So say the 4 of our guests, we play together, but we get online and we play, but we actually play a virtual golf game. And we're obviously all on a par because we're all useless at playing a computer game unless we're 16. And then we can sort of have a bit of banter about it and somehow get it together. And then later on at 6 o'clock, we'll get together. So how many 100 people, 120 people want to do it and come together. And then you have a bit of banter, you have prize giving, try and do a raffle, have a quiz, all that sort of stuff, make it fun because that's part and parcel of that.
Yeah.
So what we're finding now is people having to think about, not only just in sport, and you could argue business for all of us involved in business, we're having to think about how we apply our previous knowledge and experience into the current situation to try and make the best of it. And I suppose, with the background of sport, but never mind, but being obviously from the military, there's an element of, make do and try and adapt as you can.
Fantastic, thanks, Roy. And I think it's touching on that subject of innovation and bringing in your previous experience into the present, and how that can have such a powerful impact on what you're doing today. Liam, if we would come to you, I know you previously spoke at one of our Libs Connect events, and you showed us some really powerful graphs of where the fan base was around the world. I don't know if you recall doing that, and it showed that people were almost accessing Lincoln City from the whole world over. Obviously, lockdowns changed things and the coronavirus has changed things. Are you still looking to communicate with fans as you go through this? How are you keeping in touch with the community around you when you're not seeing them on match day?
Yeah, and I think this is probably one of the key roles for any sports club at this moment in time, is to communicate, and possibly even over communicate, and keep people in touch with their club. You know, one of the great series that we've had is just reliving some of the past, you know, games, the positive games that we've had. So on our own YouTube channels and iFollow, we've been, you know, reliving some of, you know, the great days out, the Wembley win in the Checkatrade Trophy final, you know, some you know, great games from this season. But I think part of the challenge that we have is, you know, we talk about, and Gary spoke earlier about content, you know, it's that continually feeding and making sure we can, you know, make sure people can have their fill of their sports club, of their football club, whatever it may be, despite us actually being in lockdown. Because, you know, being a fan isn't just about Saturday at 3 o'clock, as Gary, Rory and Vicky alluded to earlier. You know, it's about that whole cycle of your week. It's about your rituals, your routines. It's about the conversations you have with, you know, your mates in the pub, or over the, you know, the voice calls or whatever that we're having now. So I think this is where, as sports clubs, as pillars of the community, we've got a really important role to play, and we've got to take that responsibility very seriously as well. You know, we've got to survive as a business, and behind it all, you know, football clubs have to be businesses in some way, shape or form right now. But ultimately, it's making sure that we're still able and in a position to serve our fans. So, you know, with people on furlough using the coronavirus job retention scheme, we've still got a skeleton media marketing department that is aiming to not come out with the most polished professional kind of comms that kind of, you know, is sterile and means nothing. It's about keeping that reality and the fact that we're all hurting, we're all in this together. You know, we all don't know what it looks like from that other side, and if we can just be in some way that glue that holds the community together, or that, you know, the conduit that just keeps people talking. So through our fans forums, through the Facebook pages, through Gary's blog, through our Twitter, we've seen some great interaction, and I think that's where our responsibilities can also lie at this moment in time. And I think what you will see is our metrics and the information that we get from our interactions and our reach has surprisingly has actually gone up, you know, at this moment in time, because, you know, it's what people are looking for, and it's what people need. So I think what we've got to make sure we're doing is we've got to understand what that need is and what we're looking to satisfy, and make sure that we, like we say, we take that responsibility very, very seriously. But I think, you know, what we do find as we're going through this is that camaraderie, that citizenship, that togetherness. I think it's those key elements that are really striking through at this moment in time. You know, I was very fortunate to be part of the team that, you know, we took 30,000 fans to the capital when we played Shrewsbury in the Checkatrade Trophy final. As you said earlier, Martin, 30% of our fan base come from more than an hour and a half away at Lincoln City. We stream to 55 countries across the world. So we are not Lincoln City FC for just the people of Lincoln. There are exiles, there are expats, there are people all over the county, all over the country and all over the world that rely on Lincoln City. So we've got to make sure we serve Lincoln, Lincolnshire, United Kingdom, and, you know, without getting too extreme, and our global fan base, because that's our responsibilities and that's our obligations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I certainly have conversations with friends who are way outside of Lincoln, and they're following things really avidly, and particularly in this period, they're really interested in what's happening. Gary, I know when I've read your blog and followed you on Twitter, you obviously go to match days with your dad. It's a big family thing to go on together. What's it like at the moment? Do you think, in terms of fans and the community of fans, what's been the impact, and what's been the impact that you've seen in terms of people connecting with sports at this time?
I think We've seen the positive side of social media and virtual connecting, which perhaps we didn't see prior to the lockdown. I think social media has always been a useful tool, but it's also been a tool that can be used very negatively. And Liam will definitely allude to that. I think that we've seen you see lots of criticism, you see lots of negativity, all that sort of thing. But I think recently the social media has kind of brought fans together, and I think there has been a deeper connectivity. It's interesting what Liam said about metrics. Mine are actually down. My numbers are down quite significantly. I don't operate on an advertising model, so that's it's not a huge impact. But I think that perhaps for something like myself, which is more fan opinion, with the games not going on, people aren't visiting, you don't get as much kind of transient traffic from other teams looking to see how your team's doing ahead of the game. So I've had to really adapt in order to keep my core fan base together, or the core readership of the Stacey West. And we looked again, I think it was Rory said, about looking at different platforms. I've used StreamYard for a quiz, which was incredibly popular. You almost see a coming together of a core fan base, I think, more than anything. My site, again, I have lots of views all around the world, but to be fair, again, that's kind of shrunk a little bit as well. So I think everybody's just learning to adapt. The fans that are looking, the fans that go every week, that are really looking for content, are happy to look back in time. They're happy to go back to beating Ipswich 5-3. They're happy to go back to FA Cup games. They're happy to, all that sort of stuff, even as to reflect on relegation in 2011. Whereas I think some fans are perhaps not as engaged with that. And so then they're looking for their fix elsewhere. Esports, for instance, have been incredibly popular. I've seen several FIFA tournaments run by the club, run by Leyton Orient, I think, did one. And so I think everybody's finding a conduit in which to satisfy their thirst for sport, but we are seeing specific elements such as fan sites probably just lose a tiny little bit of traction, but also have to innovate and perhaps come out a little stronger.
Absolutely, Gary, thank you for that. And there's a couple of comments coming through, just reflecting back on Liam's point there around football and the club being cohesive, kind of a glue. The same comment coming through about education and schools can act in that same way. I think it's really true. Vicky, something we talked about previously, obviously in your day job at South Kesteven District Council, it doesn't necessarily lend itself to sports per se, and yet sports can still, and exercise broadly can still come into everyone's work life, can't it? Can you sort of give us a bit of an insight into that from your perspective?
Yeah, no, definitely. I think sport is a great equaliser, and certainly the Monday morning rituals and corridor conversations that happen at the council, you'll be surprised to know that there are two other Ipswich fans at the council, which is great. So we're taking still obviously small numbers compared to the number of Lincoln fans, as you'd expect. But yeah, sport is great, and it does still play a huge role in the day-to-day in terms of working routines. Obviously, we also have kind of a strong health and wellbeing programme, which is heavily linked to sport. Again, the physical and the mental element of that for staff, and lots of programmes to support that kind of in these lockdown times when the majority of our workforce is working from home. We're doing virtual HIT sessions, where a friend of mine actually that works at Loughborough College has been hosting those for us at 7:30 in the morning. So she's got a call following. So I think there are ways that in everyday life, sport plays a really crucial role. And I think if you are interested in sport, and whether you support or play, that you have certain traits that come out. So competitiveness, which you then see in the board meetings. I'm sure Liam and Rory and Gary see that in their workplaces as well. But it is something which is great, and does really kind of, it's one of the threads that goes through everything. And sport plays a really crucial role in terms of being able to engage with other people from different countries, different backgrounds, different places across the country. So it's just great. And I mean, as you can probably tell, I'm really passionate about it, and the link between sport and business. And I attended the event you were talking about, the Lincoln International Business School, which was sport and the effect on business. It's huge, and I think it's paying dividends at the moment, because you do need to be resilient, like you do if you play sports and stuff, to get through these tough times.
Yeah, and I think sports does build that resilience. I mean, certainly standing on a cricket field at Nocton quite a few hours on a Saturday and losing when you've only scored about 40 runs, it taught me a lot about resilience. And just thinking back to Rory's comment at the beginning, which was around about sport and maybe how much it's so important it's there in the background. Fiona McManus has put a comment on, which is perhaps how much we love sport and maybe taking the ability to go out and play for granted. has made us quite determined to be able to play. I think that's a really good point. I read in the paper just this week, Michael Atherton, ex-England cricket captain, was talking about the fact that in some ways he feels that for some mid-senior players this might come as a bit of a welcome break. There's such a treadmill of sport, and yet for other people, sports is real lifeblood, and they need it in their life every day. Roy, what's your view as a professional sports person who's
I was not a professional sports person.
I'll take that back.
I'm so old that I'm in the amateur era. So,
as a highly proficient sports person who played a lot of sports on an international stage,
okay, fair enough.
What do you think about that comment? Do you think we've taken sport for granted in this country? Is this building up a hunger for more in the future?
I don't think we've taken sport for granted, but I do think that we've become to appreciate it more. Is that a better way of putting it round?
Yeah,
I can see the point that's being made. I think it's interesting because it goes back to the point that Liam was talking about regards to integrity. One thing, especially in the rugby foot world, we're having to look at ourselves from the club's point of view because, as it would have been going on for such a long time, the sport at the highest level has been a broken model. There's just money leaking out left, right, and centre. And if there's one thing this pandemic has brought, I'm sure Liam will recognise this, trying to get 13 chairmen of the top 13 rugby clubs to agree on something, it's like herding cats. And you can quite understand why, because each of them got their own understanding of what their priorities. But there's no doubt the current situation, there's a lot more coherence about the way they want to move forward. And there's lots of things coming out from various things and where to find it. But the world of rugby is going to change. There's no doubt it has to. And I suspect football would be the same. But I think it's one of those things, it's like I said at the very beginning, you don't realise you're missing it until you do. And so now you appreciate the beauty of the game, whichever game it is, whatever sport it is, whichever ball it is. And you appreciate the skill, the endeavour, whatever people put in. But sometimes I just don't want to talk about the highest level of the game because it's like you. The fact is, you can talk and rail about the 40 all out at Nocton, and it may be the worst sort of day career, but it's something you remember back, not necessarily in fondness, but as part of your life lessons of sport. And all of us that have played sport, all of us who've watched sport and seen the highs and lows of all our teams and players, you can pick so many life lessons from that. But it's also it goes back to the whole sense of that health and well-being, and I can understand why the government want to try and get sport back on the agenda, because it gives all the people of the world, it's not just from a business perspective, it's also the sense that somebody's got something to look forward to on a weekend, to watch something which is live and fresh as opposed to watching reruns. And that makes people feel good. It gives people a target purpose to go to the end, and it's not the be all and end all, but for some people it is. I mean, Gary's talked about some of the fans. It's live and breathe whatever they do from Saturday to Saturday. And so I suppose people are appreciating now how much, if they didn't realise before, sport in whatever shape, guise, level, whatever, is so much a fabric of our society here in the UK.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And I think what we'll do now is we'll take a sort of a focus forward to the future, and I'll come around to Liam and sort of say, what next? Well, clearly, we're coming out of a situation where we're in phase, whatever it is, of the lockdown lifting off gently. There's talk about sports returning. It's an interesting time. It's also an uncertain time. What are your views for the sports club? What next? What would you like to see happen?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, what we've got to do is we've got to find a way in able to be operating in whatever landscape that we face. We've got to be pliable. We've got to be dynamic. We've got to be able to react to whatever restrictions remain, or whatever restrictions are lifted from government. First and foremost, and the caveat to everything I'm about to say here is health and safety has to come first. So once we overcome the health and safety challenges, and I appreciate that's no mean feat, I think what we've then got to understand is just the various different phases, both as clubs, organisations, and as businesses and the wider community, what effects that is. And I think we've got to have very different approaches to the various different stages. Right now we're in survival mode. First of all, we've got to survive. Second phase is about revival. If you live through survive, you then get to revive. You then get to kind of put your game back together, put your sport back together, put the club back together bit by bit, piece by piece. Now, that might not look like it used to look. That might look very different. In some places, what we've got to remember is the ritual and what it touches, what it feels like, what it smells like. That's really important to people. So as we then look to put it back together, we've got to be mindful of that. But, as competitive sports people, there is absolutely no point in doing this unless we get back to wanting to thrive and being in that third phase. There is no appeal to surviving and reviving if we're not going to thrive again. For me, we're all competitive people. Sport, breeds it in you to be competitive. But, from Lincoln City's point of view and from sports point of view, we have got to, the landscape has changed. As Rory said, I think it'll be a good financial reset. We've all sleptwalked into a ridiculous financial climate where clubs are not financially, you can't wipe their own faces. We all rely on owner funding. We all rely on outside investment. The money that's leaking out of the game is embarrassing at times to agents and other areas. We've got to take responsibility for that as custodians. We may not all have been responsible for getting into that place. Partly we may have been so, but we've absolutely got a responsibility to repair it going forward. And I think that's where there may be conflicts of interest. Lincoln City Football Club, we get one vote out of 72 members in the EFL currently. We get one vote out of 22 League One clubs when it comes to league matters. And there may be a time that I'm sat with my Lincoln City hat on and I'm asked to make a decision that could be a conflict of what's in the best interest for Lincoln City Football Club versus what's in the best interest of football. And that's where it's really difficult. I'm paid for by Lincoln City. My responsibility is to the board and the fans of Lincoln City. But equally, as a custodian to the game right now, I think we've got to have our heads up and we've got to have better vision as to what that looks like. And what I would dearly love to get to, and I'm certainly not a scientific, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a health professional, but if there is any way to occupy stadiums safely and use streaming services, if there is any way to still have a version that the game relates to what people know, that's important. As per any change model, we speak regularly from the academic point of view about the process of change from denial, resistant, exploration and commitment. Well, we're going to get people denying, what this new, I'm not going to say the phrase that everybody's using, but we're going to get a real denial as to what sport looks like. There is going to be resistance because people want what they've always had. But if we can quickly get people to exploring, our new landscape, our new being, and if we can get people to understand the wider benefits of that, and first and foremost, if we can help financially return the club to the fans and make sure, those leakages and those, insurmountable financial challenges to compete, if we can help reset that, then I think we've done our job. Not all of it, but we've hit our first and most important mandate throughout this time. But it's still, football. If I talk about football, it's still 11v11. It's still people at their peak of their abilities, going toe to toe, head to head. It's still people being bred all week, Monday to Friday, to be at the peak of their abilities in front of an audience at a weekend to delight and to keep them engaged. That is fundamentally it. Football, rugby, cricket, whatever it may be. And I remember going to watch the golf at the Open and just being absolutely mesmerized by the skill and the abilities of these players compared to when I'm hacking it around our local golf course. And we've got to get back to that. So what we can't do is when I say deprofessionalize, what we can't do is take the sport backwards. We have come forward in leaps and bounds. At Lincoln City, we watched Neil Eardley play at right back, who a couple of years ago was playing in the Premier League. And that's a joy to watch. So we've still got to retain the professionalism. We've still got to protect the high levels of competitiveness. We don't want 6-0, 7-0, every weekend. That can't be part of the future. We've got to remain, fiercely competitive right throughout the divisions. The fact that little Lincoln City can beat Burnley, can beat Ipswich, can beat Oldham as a non-league club and go and play against Arsenal at the Emirates, that's what we still want, of course. But it's got to be in a dynamic where it's still about those fine margins. And I think that's where I'd like to see us get to with a financial reset.
Okay, that's really interesting to hear. Thanks, Liam. Fantastic insight. And I'd like to just sort of switch this and move this forward into the sort of fan perspective with Gary. And Gary, you obviously connected to a lot of the fans. You write about Division 1 and 2 football. You've got an awareness of grassroots. What are fans thinking right now? What's their views on the future? Are they happy that if we get something running in any respect, will people flock back to the local football pitches, Hackney Marshes, to watch those games on a Sunday instead? What do you think is going to happen next?
I think football fans always want what they've had in the past. I think any football fan going to a Lincoln game prior to the pandemic will talk back to the early 80s and talk about how they wish they could stand on the terraces and they still had that freedom. So I think whatever happens in the future, fans will look back and say, I wish we could do this, or I wish we could do that. I think the truth is, I made a note there based on what Liam said. I think if Sincil Bank opened its doors tomorrow, irrespective of what was happening in the world, you get 3,000-4,000 people would turn up. They would not care about the health implications. They would simply have their football back. And I think that's probably the case in wider sport as well. I think there are a lot of people, certainly feedback I've seen, golfers, fishermen, tennis players, whatever, are all saying we just want to get back on the pitch. And I think in terms of watching sport, initially, I think you'll see a spike, and I think you'll see that in general business as well, in retail, for instance, where because people haven't been able to do something for so long, they're gonna literally feast on it. So when Lincoln are playing, whether that's at Sincil Bank, whether it's streamed, they'll watch that. If there's a game going on down the Sunday League, they'll watch that. You know, if Three Pigeons start kicking a fat ball about in the garden, they'll be placing bets on it. So I think that there'll be that real initial hunger. Let's be honest, in the longer term, I know Liam steered away from the word, I'm assuming it was new normal, which is what everybody's kind of saying. New normal is a concept that we have at the moment. But in reality, let's move 6 months, 8 months, 9 months in the future. I think we'll actually see a return to normal, not in the way that football's run, but from a fan perspective. You know, we don't see the inner workings. I'm very lucky. I sit on the supporters board, so I do understand the business of of football and of Lincoln City as well. But from a fan's perspective, there's a ceiling that they don't see beyond. So they see 11 players, they see transfers, they see injuries, they see managerial decisions, they see other teams spending money, and I think that will just return to normal. I think the way and the method by which fans support their club probably won't change fundamentally once things die down. Now, I think in the past, obviously, Lincoln City have had their problems with administration in 2002. And that was, again, when you're thinking, are we going to lose 6-7-0 every week? I think the real difference here is that every single club is going to be in the same boat, more or less. Some will be more financially impacted than others. But the playing field is going to remain level, largely, unless you have the rich owner at a certain club who thinks, I'll take advantage of this and push the wages up. But generally, I think the fan will see very little difference in the way that the club is being run compared to other clubs. And I think that's the difference between, for instance, when we were administration in 2002 and the financial situation right now.
Thank you very much, Gary. And it's absolutely fascinating, isn't it, how it all interacts? And just getting a couple of comments through on the Facebook page. So Claire Gilman-Abel saying people are enjoying outdoor physical activities at the minute, but we're lucky with the weather. And so it's to Gary's point around people find a way with sport, you know, the marble racing around the back garden that Gary Lineker put on his Twitter feed, etc. Things may not be commercially viable in the future. And there's another comment from Maria Wilson who says she, an ex-private gym member, she suspects many people may not go back to what they've been doing because they've seen that walking and exercising is another way forward. Now, this is a point I was going to put to Vicky because I think you mentioned that you'd looked at other sports. Was it virtual darts?
Yeah, well, me and a group of my friends, we've all invested in dart boards if we didn't have them already, and we have a game on a Saturday afternoon to fill the void of the football results coming in or being at the game, to have a bit of creative competitiveness via actual darts. But obviously, you have to position your camera very carefully to ensure no cheating's happening, and there has to be some rules around that. No VAR though for darts. And yeah, it is about, I think, being creative. But I think the point about the gyms is quite interesting because I think there will be a real shift because, like Liam said, health and safety is obviously the main focus and is paramount to ensure the safety of people who are exercising. And there will be a shift on whether things like gyms can remain commercially viable and how they adapt and whether they use other community assets to help facilitate socially distanced yoga body pump classes and Les Mills classes. So I think it's going to be a real shift and there will be a transition period. But then whether we stay in that transition period because people change their habits and rituals, or kind of change sports or get interested in other areas, it does also open up other opportunities, I think, for people to try things that they might not have done previously. So although obviously these are very scary times that we're living through, there are some opportunities, and you have to try and look for some other ways to channel kind of those sporting urges in a positive way.
Absolutely agree. And I think this whole series that we've been running has been entitled Resilient Lincolnshire. Now, it's not, we've got a lot of people on from Lincolnshire, but that resilience is something that's so important across the whole of the working world. And as a business school, it's something we have to care about. And it ties in very clearly to not only emotional resilience, but innovation. It's taking those ideas, doing things in a different way, whether you're owning or consuming sport. And sport's a little bit like water, it'll find a way. You'll get that competitive element in there, even if it's running around your garden 130 times, which I've seen a lot of people do on Strava. Now, we're moving towards the last 10 minutes or so. We've had a really interesting question come through from Caroline. I know Caroline from the YMCA. Hi, Caroline. Welcome onto the question board. And does the panel feel that the pause in being able to participate and watch team sports will have any effect on young people's view of sports? And if so, what measures need to be put in place post-lockdown? Rory, do you have any views on that?
Oh, yeah, it's interesting. I was on a Zoom call with an old teammate of mine from Leicester Tigers, Adele Cardooni, who's down in London now, and he coaches his kids rugby, but of course can't do it at the moment. So they still get together on a Tuesday and Thursday night on Zoom calls and do a whole bunch of stuff from a social perspective, but he's trying to keep that community going. But of course, what you're missing out of is actually playing the sport. A fascinating question, and to be honest with you, is there going to be impact? I don't know. I go a lot back to what Gary was talking about. There is a desire to want to go and play sport, and we're a tribal race. People, we like being with other people, and as soon as the letdown eases to such a state, they'll be out kicking the ball around in the park or in the garden with their mates down the street and breaking windows and stuff like that. I suspect that will get back to happening again. I mean, it's interesting. All the different phrases. Fundamentally, what is the world going to look like when we go back is the main challenge. And I think the majority of it will be going back to doing what we've done before. For some people, it will change. They'll have seen a different light. They'll have done, like was said before, that they will go and do a different sport because they've suddenly been introduced to a different sport rather than what they did before. So there's no doubt that this period will have changed people's experiences around what they like, what they want to do, what they need to do, etc., because they've had to. And some will stick with that. Some will just go back to doing what they've done before. So I suspect there's going to be a sort of resynchronization going for some people, and we won't know the answer to that question until the ONS of the world do their stats later on down the line in 5, 10, 15 years' time.
Yeah, and I think we'll find a lot of things out as we go through this that maybe are unexpected. Liam, I'm just interested. We talked about resilience. We talked about innovation. Have you seen anything innovative, or is there anything on the horizon that's really innovative? You think that's going to be a game changer? There's going to be something different that comes out on the other side of this change, or as we go through this change? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I think the first thing that we're noticing is the role that technology is playing in keeping us connected, keeping us engaging. So previously, when we talk about metrics and measures, what we do see is we traditionally, and without generalizing, but this is based on data, we see a bit of a glass ceiling at around 45 to 49 years worth, ages, in terms of engaging with the football club on different platforms, and getting involved through those measures, be it YouTube, be it Instagram, TikTok, or whatever these things are nowadays. But I think what I do see going forward, and it probably goes back to in my time in business, it happened in the great crash of 2008. I do see the values and the levels of citizenship and collaboration once again, seeing those being topped up and getting people to work collaboratively. To put it into perspective, never in my I've worked in football since leaving school in 2000. And never in 20 odd years of being in the game have I seen, as Rory alluded to earlier, chairmen and owners as close as we are at the moment to finding common solutions. We're not there, and there's still problems, but we had absolutely zero chance to fixing some of the game's problems prior to this. But at least what we've got now is we've got a motivator. There's been something that's been there to help us and encourage us to do that. I think from, there's two sides to this, but, reading a report from KPMG the other day, we were looking at the fact that they reckon 4 billion euros has been wiped off the valuation of players in the big 5 leagues. Now, that's all within the financial ecosystem of football. Now, that scares Lincoln City in some ways, because what that does do is that that money trickles down. It's like buying or selling a house. There are renters, there are buyers. That whole ecosystem, ultimately, if Kylian Mbappe goes for 200 million in some way, shape, or form, that will filter down into League One, League Two clubs in various different countries, different divisions. So I think there will be a reset of player valuations. And I think that will bring a level playing field. So to answer your question specifically, I don't think there's necessarily, like Gary says, I don't think there's going to be anything particularly new. We're not going to be playing robo football, or we're not going to be, doing anything quite like that. But I do think there are going to be game changers in the nuances of the details, but the nuances being some of the key elements of how we trade, how we go around. And ultimately, what we would like to see is a more competitive, level playing field in some degree. We're not after communism. We don't, it's not fair that Sunderland can, have got to be locked into a same, operating system as Lincoln. Very different clubs, very different organisations. We're both in League One at the moment, but we've just got to find a way to get through this and equally use this as an opportunity to repair some of the broken elements of the game.
So it's an opportunity. It's back to this idea of opportunities, risks being inherent in every change situation. It just so happens this is almost a mega change. There's so many things that are going on. It's finding them out. I quite like the sound of robo football, Liam. Is that on the list of things you're looking at?
Yeah, I'm not too sure I do, Martin. Bless you. I think, but no, I think this is, it's been really interesting as the Gary Lineker feed and Gary and his pigeons in his back garden. And the question from Caroline, earlier. I think there are some of us that are just absolutely desperate. I was reading somewhere that the Belarusian Football League has seen something like 300% increase in its viewership because it's the only football league that was going on for a certain time. So people will find probably illegal ways to be watching these sports and whatever, just because they need their fix. So I think it's still, as Gary says, it still looks, smells, feels like the sport that we knew. It will just be some of those peripheral elements, like Gary says as well, often things that people don't see that are probably going to change, that will affect the athletes, the players, the participants, more than it necessarily affects the fans.
Yeah, fantastic. And Gary, any final thoughts on innovation, particularly as you're a sports writer, in terms of how you've had to act in this whole thing and how you think you might take things forward as a blogger?
I think once things set to not a normal, but once games resume, from my point of view, I think the output will go back to pretty much normal. I'll certainly be hosting much more digital content and online content. I had a face very much suited to radio before the pandemic, but it seems that some of the live stuff I've done has been quite popular. And I was interested in the question that we were asked about how young people might engage with sport. And just from personal experience, I have a 10-year-old nephew who has never really shown an interest in coming to Lincoln City. But since the pandemic, he's only been able to go and play in his back garden with a football. He turned 10 on Monday. We bought him, I bought him some Lincoln City stuff and kind of forced it on him. And he's got this real hunger now for coming to a game, because he's not been able to go out and play with his friends. All the football he's seen has been on FIFA. He's been able to learn the players. He's been able to take that time because he's been away. So I just wonder if, in actual fact, again, we might see that spike. It might be that when families start coming back together, it is through sport. It is still, because I'll still be going to the football. So if I want to see Isaac, he sounds quite selfish, but it'll be a great opportunity to take him along as well. So I think that the future, it's hard to see it right now, but I think that the future could be exciting, because it could see a reset in the way that football manages itself. It could see differences in the way that people get their exercise. I've walked 4 miles a day through the pandemic. I used to do probably 1 or 2. Okay, it may have a knock-on effect for things like gyms. There may be some sports that suffer. But as Rory said as well, we all want to play sport. We're a resilient people, and I think generally there will be positives when we come away from the current situation.
Thanks, Gary. That's a really useful reflection. And I'll go to Vicky. Final comment, and then we'll hand back to Ruchi. But how do you think sports is going to weave itself back into the fabric of life, maybe in the workplace or in our personal lives once this lockdown is started to be lifted further?
I think it's if you're a sports fan, it's still there and it's still very present. Obviously, we're just saying that we're channeling it in different ways or accessing it in different ways, and certainly technology, like Liam says, playing a huge part in ensuring that people are getting their fill still. I think when we do kind of move into this transition period through the easing of the lockdown measures, sport will become more prominent. And linking back to Caroline's question, unlike what Gary said, I do think, again, in terms of kind of the younger demographic, that there is a huge opportunity for those people that maybe were on the cusp, or children that maybe had a bit of an interest through school but not massively, and because now it's been taken away, it's that age old that when you can't do something you really want to do it. So I think actually at grassroots level we probably will see a massive increase in participation, and again for some of the NGBs and governing bodies it'll be a real opportunity to put measures in place to encourage and nurture that enthusiasm and encourage them into sports and different sports, not just some of the mainstream sports. So it is going to be some interesting times ahead. And I think in terms of the workplace, sport is important and will continue, certainly from, the internal measures we have at the council, even things like fantasy football, which is a massive thing I'm missing, especially being the reigning champion of South Kesteven against all the men, which is great. But
not really competitive at all.
No, not competitive at all. But all those things play a really big part, and it'll be nice to see some of those things coming back in, because again, it does help with that kind of teamwork, that ethic, that competitiveness, all those traits that are really important that come into the workplace to, produce productive businesses and outcomes.
Fantastic. And that's about time up, guys. But I just want to say thank you so much for taking time out of busy times, although we may all be at home, it's still very busy, and taking time to give your views and thoughts. They've all been brilliant to hear. The thing that I'm really picking up on is across all of you guys, it's realism. We know what we're dealing with, but it's realism which is coupled with positivity and innovation. I think that's got to be a good thing. So thanks so much for your conversation, your time, and I'll hand back to Ruchi for the final wrap up.
That's absolutely amazing. And, just want to say what Martin said, which is what an amazing panel. And we just had a great positive feeling about this, because it's a topic that touches everybody's lives. And if you look at the construct of this panel, we knew it had to go well. And Tars, our marketing manager, who's quite a sports person himself and smells sports, as you said, Liam, has told me, in advance that this is going to be one cracker of a panel. And we just are so pleased. Martin, I don't know how you held so much of talent on this panel together and, negotiated and navigated it so well over the past hours. So you did a fabulous job, Martin. Thank you for getting so many perspectives out from this whole thing. So one final word I want from the panel, if you don't mind. It's a quick game, a one-word game. So I'm going to start with you, Vicky. So the question is, sport to our lives in Lincolnshire is one quick word.
Amazing.
It's
amazing.
Fantastic. Rory, sport to our lives in Lincolnshire is
fun.
Yay. Liam, sport to our lives is
everything.
Wow. Gary, from the supporters' perspective.
Vital.
Fantastic. Wow. I mean, look at those words. And for us, and I'm sure that everyone who's viewing this and will view it subsequently as the recording will associate with all the words that you brought up. Such absolutely fundamental, words that sum up the spirit of this game. And it's touching everyone's lives. And I think, as you rightly said, that, we are in this together. If we keep talking, we keep connecting, and we keep finding that, that spot which keeps us connected to this world of health, fitness, sport, and the business of sport. I think we're onto a big win. So, many thanks, Vicky, Liam, Gary, Rory, and of course, Martin, and to all our listeners today. I think it was absolutely fantastic having you. And we're very honored and proud to have you as collaborators of the business school as well. and we hope to continue this association with you. So this was, episode 5 of Business Beyond the Curve at Resilient Lincolnshire. There is a lot to come next week, and we are a busy team. That's going to continue conversations like this. If you don't mind, I'm going to keep the panel up while I show the next few coming up. So the next one on Tuesday next week is the dynamic of the visitor economy. So it's very, very important, again, the place that we are in Lincolnshire, which drives a lot of what we do, the economy, people, lives, wellness. We're going to touch upon that in a power-packed panel again on Tuesday. Do follow us on Facebook and LinkedIn to figure out, what times we're going to introduce that on. Very interestingly, on a Wednesday, we have, the executive education series, in fact, that Martin's going to lead, which is Change is Changing, and how an introduction to a concept called Change Spectrum is what he's going to bring up. Do please tune in for that as well. And it's a packed week because on Friday, we're going to be speaking crucially to the military and talking about marching onward and the resilience that the military has inbuilt into them. So a very, very exciting week for all of us here, at the business school and for everybody in Lincolnshire. So do keep staying engaged and do keep sending us your views and what you'd like to hear, because this series, Resilient Lincolnshire, is going to continue through the year. So thank you very much for panel once again. And Martin, thank you so much. And to everybody, do stay engaged and stay safe.
Thanks very much all. Take care.